Hello guys and welcome back to our database course. So today we'll be starting with group by, and let's begin with the very basics and see what a group actually is and how we enact with it. So uh before actually going into group by, we'll talk about what a group is, right? We'll talk about what a group is, what it does. So I have taken some people here, right? Some people and let's assume that they are randomized, right? Now I can say that every person here has a name, has an age, has a date of birth, and I say that I want to group these people based upon the year they were born in, right? Based upon the year they were born in. I'm saying that everybody who was born in one year is in one group. I can do that, right? So, for example, let's take that these three people were born in 1991. So, 1991, right? Let's take these let's not take these people. Let's take these four people. Let's take these four people and say that they were born in 1876. Let's take these two people and say that they were born in 2005. All right, and how whatever is left here, let's just say that born in they were all born in they were all born in 1989. All right, so what I have done in this process is I have divided these people based on their birth year, right? I've divided them into groups: one group, two group, three group, and fourth group, right? And these are all what based upon the year they were born in. So this was the condition, the year was the condition based upon which they were grouped into, right? And that is what our group by does, right? So let's understand what a group is, right? So a group is a collective thing, right? So I said each of these people, right? Each of these people have a name, have an age, have a date of birth, right? Can you tell me what the name of this group is, or what the age of this group is? I mean, you can probably tell what the age of this group is since we have grouped by year. So let's not take that example. Let's just say apart from name, age, date of birth, let's just say they had an Aadhaar number, right? So let's change the question here a little bit and let's say, can you tell me the name of this group? Can you tell me the Aadhaar number of this group, right? Can you tell me the date of birth of this group? Can you tell me the year of birth of this group, right? So answer first three would be a no, right? Big no. So the name of this group, it has not been decided, right? The name of the group has not been decided. It does not depend on what this person's name is, or what this person's name is, or what this person's name is, right? That is not the name of the group, right? And then we asked, what is Aadhaar number of this group? Of course, it does not exist, right? This person has an Aadhaar number. This guy also does. This guy also does, and this guy also does. But that does not mean that this group has one, right? It's not that simple, right? One attribute that is applicable to every element in the group, right? Attributes applicable to every element in the group might not necessarily be applicable to the whole group, right? Like the example of Aadhaar number, it is applicable on every element of our group, but it is not applicable for the whole group, right? Our group would not have an Aadhaar number. Similarly, we said that can you find date of birth of this group? You only know the year, right? You only know the year. You do not know the date of birth, right? So you of course know uh, what date of birth of this guy is and what date of birth of this guy is, but what is the date of birth of this group? So there is none. So there is nothing like that. But there does exist a birth year for this group. And that is because that was the condition that we used to group it, right? The condition that we used to group it was year, and that is why this exists, right? So that is what basically a group is, right? And a group by simply specifies the condition that we are using to group things, right? The condition that we are using to group things. So uh, let's take an example, right, in terms of table, because I find people confusing in group by a lot. So let's take a table and let's use it as an example, right? So uh, let's say I have name, right, and I can't draw straight lines. I have age, I have Aadhaar, right, and let's also take a profession. And I say, let's take some values, right? So let's take some value. Name is A, B, C, D. Age can be 1, 2, 4, 7. Aadhaar 001. All right, and profession could be engineer, teacher. What else do we have? Electrician, doctor, right? And I let's take some common values, right? Let's add some more info here. So E, F, G as well, right? And 2, 4, 8. Of course, this is going to be unique, right? The only unique thing is Aadhaar number, right? We already know that. So let's add some more professions here. Doctor, let this guy be engineer as well, and let this guy be engineer as well. There's a lot of engineers in the race. So let's see what happens when I group by profession, right? So I am saying everybody who has same profession is to be grouped together, right? So what happens is I would find unique values on my profession column, right? On my profession attribute. So I find engineer, right? Then I find teacher, right? Then I find electrician. Then I find doctor, right? And everything else that comes after is just repeated, right? Now, what if I tried to access these attributes for the group, right? What would happen if I tried to access these attributes for my group? So what is the Aadhaar number of the group engineer, right? There is no such thing, right? There is no value for that attribute, because Aadhaar number for that group does not exist, right? Aadhaar number exists for a person in that group, right? It does not exist for the whole group, right? So what exists for the whole group? If I'm saying that these things do not exist for the whole group, right? The name does not exist, age does not exist, Aadhaar number does not exist, profession that exists, but only because we grouped it based on profession, right? So if I'm saying these things don't exist, then what exists? So what grouping like this basically means that this engineer is one field. However, this one field of engineer represents all engineers present in this table, right? So it would represent this guy, it would represent this guy and this guy, right? So I can say the average age of engineers in this table, obviously, right? The sum of ages in this table for engineers, right? The average Aadhaar number, or the first name, like by first I mean alphabetically first, not first, right? So I can find out all those things, but they are what? They are a part of the group, right? We are finding elements inside the group, right? These are all properties of the group, right? We are making up these properties. We are saying, count the number of engineers in it, right? How many engineers are there? So that could be a property of our group, right? How many people are inside this group is a property of the group, right? What is the average age of the people in this group is a property of the group, right? Is an attribute of the group, right? But what the age is not an attribute, right? I hope I'm making sense, right? I hope I'm making sense. The group attributes are different from element attributes, right? So I have a profession here, I have an Aadhaar number here, I have an age here, I have a name here. However, When I group things, that is not going to be the case, right? So you can imagine a group somewhat like this, right? Let's elaborate a little more, right? So you can imagine that each group has a table, right? Each group has a table of itself. Again, this is all just for you to understand. It does not happen like this, but you can, for your understanding, imagine that each group gets its own table where it can store its data, right? So engineer would have our A one age and his Aadhaar 001, right? Then we also have F4 and 006, right? F4006. We also have G8 and 716. For our teacher, we have only one, that is B2003, right? For our electrician as well, we have only one. So C4006, right? We have two doctors, D719 and E24, right? You can assume something like this. Now, if I try to ask you something about the engineer group, you would be able to tell, but would you be able to tell me the name? Would you be able to tell me the age? Would you be able to tell me the Aadhaar number? You won't. What would you be able to tell me? The count of these things, right? The average of these things, right? The sum of these things. You can make something out of it, right? You can add them, you can subtract them, you can divide them, you can group them, you can count them, you can make an average out of them, but you cannot display something normally, right? You can't ask for the name. I can ask for the first name, right? I can ask for the first name. I can ask for the youngest age in this, right? I can ask for the oldest guy in this, right? But I cannot ask for the age, right? I can ask for the average age, but I cannot ask for the age. I hope that made sense. So let's move on a little bit more and let's see how we go about grouping things up. So let's say that the table example we took up was called user, right? The table was called user. So we wanted to group by profession, right? So we are going to do something like this. Select, we'll see what comes in here, from user, where whatever condition you want to give, let's actually not have where in, right? From user, and I say group by profession, right? This is what I have done right now. So I am saying select something from user, group by profession. What this means is group by profession, create this thing, and then select some things out of it, right? So what are those things that can be selected? So can I write star here? And the answer is no. Why no? Because star means get all the fields, and by all the fields it means these all fields. Of course you can't get these fields for your groups, right? These fields do not exist for the group, right? So what exists for the group? Only those attributes can be called here, and that simply means that this column can be called, right? And we can call what? We can call some statistical functions, right? So I can get average of any column, right? Of any column. I can get max of any column. I can get min of any column, right? I can get sum of any, I can get all these things, but I cannot get the column itself, because column itself would not have a single value, right? All of these are going to take multiple inputs, give me a single output, right? So I can have that single value represented for the whole group. All right. I hope that made sense. So let's see what more we can do when we are grouping, right? So while we are grouping, I can add some more conditions to it, right? So I said you had an original table, right? I said you had an original table, and when we grouped, this got divided into some tables that were owned by each of the groups, right? We said something like this. We can do something that makes sure that certain types of values are not included, right? So I can say group by profession. So we are doing what we did earlier. We are grouping by profession, having. So we are grouping these people by profession, but these people should have age. These people should have age greater than 15. So I'm doing the same thing, but I am adding another condition on my group, right? I'm adding a condition on my group and I'm saying group by profession, but only group those people who have their ages greater than 15. Only group those people who have their ages greater than 15, right? So it's the same thing, but people who have ages less than 15 will not be included here, right? Even people with ages equal to 15 will not be included here. So having is simply specifying a constraint on my group, right? I can say having, let's see my table. So I can say having name that comes after a certain alphabetical order, right? Like I can say name that comes after AC in my dictionary, right? Age that is greater than 7, right? I can say Aadhaar number that is greater than 12 or less than 12 for that matter, right? I can say any of those things. I can also say having the sum of age and Aadhaar is equal to something or greater than something or less than something, right? So I can specify a condition on which eligibility for the group is decided, right? I am deciding if this person is eligible for the group, even though he should be included based on the condition. Is he even eligible to be included in the group, right? Is he even eligible to be included in my group? So let's try this out in our practical and test out how things work. So let's discuss having and where, right? Let's see if they can be used together, and if they can, what are the differences between them, right? So let's take the same example we took for our group by, right? So we have a table and we are grouping it with our profession column, right? And I said that you can assume that each group gets its own table to store its own data, right? Ignore the fact that there's a 2-year-old doctor, but regardless, each group gets its own table to store its data. But this is all what assumption, right? This is what we are assuming is happening, right? But what actually happens is we process all of this, and this table is actually never stored, right? What is stored is a single attribute, or perhaps multiple depending upon the situation, right? A single attribute that has some group attributes, right? That represents the whole group, right? So when I say having, I am applying conditions here, right? I am saying whether or not these are eligible to be included in these groups or not, right? That is what my having is doing, right? That is what having is doing, right? But what about where? What does where do? So where would work on our table formed with the groups, right? So we have grouped some information and we have some group attributes, right? So now when I use where now, it is going to act upon these group attributes, right? So I can say where this column is greater than some value or less than some value or equal to some value, right? I cannot say where this has a person or some element that has age 2, right? I cannot say that. That would be under having, right? So when I want to check if something is contained within a group, I use having. When I want to add a condition to the group, I would use where. Alright, so that was the major difference between our having and where. And yes, you can use them together, and you already know what the differences are, right? My having would be working on the original table, right? It would work on the original table, making sure that only the desired values go inside the group, and not anything and everything. And my where would be used to filter out the grouped data, right? It is used to filter out the grouped data. All right, so today we'll be starting with our case example, right? So to the people who have already done some sort of programming, they already know what case is, right? Matlab this is exactly the same as what your switch case does, right? Exactly the same as what that is. So let's begin with, right? So matlab whenever I have a table, and for a certain column or for a certain range of columns, I can make a case by case thing, right? Whenever I need something that needs to be broken down case by case, I would be using my case statement, right? So for example, I have taken a table that has name, age, and department, right? And matlab, the department is basically the department number, right? So for example, matlab, let's elaborate on this, right? So there's your name, right? There's your age, and there's your department number, right? And basically name would have something, age would have something, and department number would have one of these three, right? So 0, 1, or 2, right? And this is non-comprehensible, right? If you say department 0, nobody understands what that means, right? If I say tech department, people would know something, right? If I say sales department, people would understand something, right? But if I say department 0, nobody understands anything, right? So to make sure that such kind of information is displayed in a comprehensible manner, but stored in an efficient way, what you can do is use case statements, right? So the way I've stored it is I have given each department a number, and I know what these numbers stand for, right? I don't need to remember them. I can simply code it, right? So what I'm doing is I'm saying select name and age, and for department, whenever you see, right, whenever the case of 0 arises, right, whenever the department is 0, what you do is you display tech. Okay, you display tech. Whenever the case of 1 arises, you do what? You display sales, right? Whenever department is equal to 1, you do what? Display sales, right? Whenever the case of 2 arises, whenever the department is 2, you do what? You display HR, right? Now the question is, where do I display these things? So if you don't tell it anything, right, it's going to make a column by itself and name it whatever he thinks is right. So malab, it could be just some garbage value, it could be question mark something, question mark, right? It could be okay, malab, it could be anything, right? So what we can do to make sure that the heading is also comprehensible is give it an alias, right? We have already talked about aliases, and you know that this is how you give an alias, right? So we are saying this is right, this is one statement, right? And we are saying this as this name, right? So this is the column name that we would be having, right? So let's break it down a little bit more, right? We are saying select name, age, and this thing as department name. And what is this thing? This says whenever department is 0, you make it tech, right? So this new column called department name is created, and then whenever my department is 0, I'm going to write tech here, right? Whenever it is 1, I'm going to write sales here, right? Whenever it is 2, I'm going to write HR there, right? There is also a default case, right? There's also a default case in which whenever it is not one of these, it is going to take that value, right? So for example, I can have somebody who is not in any department, and let's say I assigned it -1, or let's say I have four types of people who are not in any department, right? So I can say default right here. I can say default and then give it a value no department. Okay, so I can make it like that. So anybody who is not from 0, 1, 2 department is going to say no department, right? So that was your case statement, right? To the people who already have done some part of programming, they already know what a switch case is, right? You guys already know what switch case is, and that is exactly the same as this, right? So you don't necessarily have to use it in this way. You can also use it in a DDL fashion, right? Where you say whenever the case of department equal to 0 arises, update salary by adding 2000, something like that, right? So for example, I have to give appraisal to everybody based on departments, right? So I can have a table which has name, department, salary, and some ID, right? Whatever. So I can say whenever department is this, raise salary by 5000. Whenever department is this, raise salary by 2000, right? I can do something like that, right? And this is also a very clear example of case, right? Whenever the case of 0 arises, increment by 5000. Whenever the case of 1 arises, increment by 2000. Okay, so I hope that was clear. Let's move on with the next topic. One thing that I forgot to mention was that switch case in SQL carries a customary break, right? So what I mean by that is when this happens, this would not get executed, this would not get executed, but this would be directly skipped, right? So in normal switch case, what happens is when I run this, all the things following it would be tested, right? So what I'm trying to say is the default would be straight up skipped if this is run, right?